Okay, so first of all, can you all hear me? And once we confirm that, we can then get started. Okay, so it seems like people can hear me. Okay, so I'll switch over to this. Excellent. So, as you can see, this is what we're going to go over once again. It is from over a week ago and obviously actually a few months ago. But we're going to be talking about this. We're going to be talking about kind of expectations for the year in Avatar. And that's what we're going to do for the stream here to start 2025. I would just say, kind of as like a kind of opening statement, that I think just I'm fully this year in the mode of no more waiting, no more it's too early. They have to deliver this year. They really, really do have to deliver. At some point this year, official communication just has to start, and I do think they have to say something sooner rather than later. We'll discuss, of course, how realistic or not kind of it is. This potential schedule here, again, it's quote unquote official. There's nuance to it, but it's close-ish. But obviously, it's not direct official communication, but it's close enough. It seems like so. I guess we'll start with this because this is kind of what I think is on everyone's mind because it's the most recent news that we got. But again, some context on this. This is a screenshot from a really small video that where this is effectively all of the news and information in it. That video was posted back in September. So it was only found like 9 days ago, but it's been up all that time. The person who posted it has worked for Paramount doing marketing and kind of stuff like this. The kind of visual kind of graphic stuff like this at events that we know Avatar stuff has been at. It was in a video called Avatar Legends, and so it matches up with a lot of the stuff that we do know, but there's also a few hints at other bits and pieces. Obviously, there's no other commentary to go with it. It's just how you interpret the images. But I did this in a video, and we also kind of covered this elsewhere as well. Okay, so whoa, that's crazy. So massive super chat from Oracle here. Major thank you there. Happy birthday. So yes, it is my birthday today. I did a birthday stream I think last year as well. I decided I'd do it this year as well just because it fell on a weekend and it was like, hey, decent time to do it. But yes, major thank you Oracle for that super chat. And yeah, we'll just get into it here because like I said, this is the year we need to get excited about Avatar. This is the year we need to just really just have stuff happen, obviously. So yeah. Love the reviews, amazing guides. Yeah, getting into the comics and stuff like that. Because yeah, for me and the channel, just reflecting on things a little bit. It's this really interesting situation where I did coverage on Korra when it was airing, but it was not my focus. I was more focused on the podcast, on the site, ATLA Online at the time. And I'm more focused on YouTube after Korra. So most of my YouTube attention has been on this period where we've been not focused on animation. So I'm really, really excited to finally get to kind of cover an Avatar animated stuff properly, fully on YouTube. And, just get back into that kind of really, really hype kind of cycle style stuff. So let's talk about this. So, yes, if you never saw the video, because one thing to know about this video was taken down. Like basically, I would say it's probably like 18 to 24 hours after the news of this went public. What ended up happening was that the video got taken down. It seems like the full account for that person who worked for Paramount just kind of scrubbed their entire account. It got completely taken down. The timing, of course, on that, there's only one way to interpret that. Well, technically there's two, but I think we know which one it was. Either It was a mistake, it wasn't meant to be there, and it was just taken down because it's not valid and it's misinformation. Or two, and the thing we've seen before, Paramount has attempted at times to take down stuff that gets out there. And that's the big thing. That they did this, remember the 2023 CinemaCon image that leaked out? They tried to take that down. It didn't work, of course, because it had spread at that point, but they did try to do that. The Avatarist, if you've seen his videos, you'll note that his initial video covering the Avatar Pavi show stuff got taken down. He didn't have any of the kind of copyrighted material in it. He just talked about it, and they tried to take that video down. So Paramount has been doing this, like they've been more vocal trying to take down the quote-unquote rumors and leaked information. And I think we know what's happened in this situation here as well. They don't want this outright just yet. They want to be in control of the information, even though, you know, it's about time, I think, they finally get into it. So yeah, the video basically just these squares, these slides basically come onto the screen in order to give you the kind of chronological Avatar kind of stuff that's actually happening. So they highlight Netflix Avatar being greenlit for season 2 and 3. Now, from a Paramount perspective, of course, that's a separate thing because that's done through Netflix, though Avatar Studios have some vague involvement in that because it's still part of the franchise overall. So I think that is treated sort of separately to just highlight that, hey, you guys probably know about the Netflix Avatar show because season 1 already came out. Here's the other stuff we have going on, because very clearly what this video is that I think it was meant to be shown to basically people in businesses, I think mainly to merchandise people, to highlight, here's why you should get the Avatar license. Here is why you should be super invested in Avatar merchandise and products, because look how well Netflix Avatar did. It got approved already for season 2 and 3. And then proper Avatar stuff is coming then afterwards. We've got this movie, there's another movie, there's a third movie, and multiple series and other content is happening. That's what's going on here. So that's the first thing. Of course, Aang the Last Airbender, the theatrical, I just have the detail down here. Right now, this is what we know on this. Aang the Last Airbender is the working title, though how you read into the logo here, I suppose for chat, what do you view when it comes to that logo? What are your thoughts on that? I think it's nice. There's a few interesting details with it, for sure. One is, I guess I stopped for a second. Okay, it's back. Few interesting details here. You'll note the element logos on the top. They're ordered in kind of Aang's order, where air is first, which is, I think, different than the way it usually is. I think the font is kind of nice. Obviously, there's not much to it because it's just a text logo. Whereas I think we're looking for visuals at this point. We really, really desperately want those visuals at all costs, and we're not getting them. Obviously, this logo will be on stuff that has visuals. Like whenever a poster comes out, I'm guessing it will be this logo or whatever the finalized title actually is with a visual. And it will look a lot better in that case overall. But I think that just as a text title logo, I think that's pretty nice overall. That's my thoughts on the basic idea here. Again, we have to have the discussion about, is it a good title for the movie? I think it's kind of boring, but it's functional. And for the relaunch of the franchise, probably exactly what we need. I think that's the main thing I would say about the title. If they just go with simply Aang the Last Airbender, maybe Aang the Last Airbender Lost Realm, like we maybe think it's going to be, I think that's fine. I don't think they're ever going to nail the overall titling on this. It makes sense to be what we need it to be. I know as a franchise, we probably want to move away from The Last Airbender being attached to everything. But I think for the movie that's going to relaunch things, I think fair enough. Maybe they'll do the thing where, there's maybe time jumps maybe between the movies, and we get to the point where we get to the point where Tenzin is born, and we can fully drop the Last Airbender thing because it's not the case anymore. But there's still a bit of time to go before that, because we're expecting Boomy to either just about be born or not quite be born where this movie is going to be set. We'll talk about speculation about the details of the Aang movie a little bit later on. I do want to get through this. But yeah, this is a big one. They need to just get this right. This needs to be solid fundamentals Avatar. And so yeah, I understand why they're playing it very safe with just the obvious stuff you would expect. I think we are all looking for, where is Avatar going to get used in any way in the titling marketing? Like, is it Avatar Legends and The Last Airbender? Because it seems like Avatar Legends is what they're going for like the official franchise kind of title, which is I'm fully on board with. I think that makes complete sense. Given that we can't just use Avatar, I think Avatar Legends fits perfectly for what we're doing, given that we're a multi-generational kind of franchise, of course, here. So that's fine. So that makes sense. Earth Symbol, the new series here, of course. This is the Avatar Pavi stuff, potentially Avatar Nisha stuff as well. Earth Avatar After Korra series, where, of course, we had the leaks all throughout December. We actually know quite a bit of information about this, assuming you read a lot into the leaks, which I think it's hard to deny. Most of those leaks are kind of valid if you've actually seen them all. It's pretty clear, and has been for some time, that this is what the first series is. It's pretty clear here. They have the Earth symbol over the first new series here. It's clear that this is what we're doing. As for information, will it have 3 to 4 seasons? All we know from the information that's come out so far is that at the very least, the voice actors initially from the casting information were told 26 episodes. Now again, that's from 2023 information. We don't know what the plan overall is. 26 episodes might be an initial first run that we're bringing you on. This is for sure locked in. Like, this is not going to be we'll do one season and see how it goes for season 2. For sure, probably 2 13-episode seasons for 26 episodes. And then, who knows, we'll see if they plan to do more. Because obviously, our expectations are that we're going to do in or around 52 episodes, because that's what kind of the franchise has been. ATLA was 61. We don't really do that number anymore, the kind of 20-episode seasons anymore. We usually do 13. So it sort of makes sense. But also, we don't really know the exact details of the scope of this show necessarily, in terms of what is the studio's plan for the series? How long running is this going to be? Like, if you look at this list across here, is this series going to be over before this one begins? Because if the plan is 2026, maybe late 2026, or like mid to late 2026 for this, which I think is reasonable. Or do they do 2026, this is 2027, movie 2 is 2028, next series is 2029? I don't think that's the case, because I think everyone's come to the conclusion that the new content with Fire is referring to the AAA video game Ice Wars, which is expected, I think, probably more like 2028. So if it is in rough chronological order, I think we are kind of compressing things a little bit more together on some of these projects, where, you know, they don't really know exactly how long the game is going to take. It could be longer, and I think that's maybe why it's put off on the end. So, but that's where we get into it here, because they don't say for sure that, like, obviously this ends at a certain point, because the new series starts here, but it could be continuing throughout all of this stuff. Like, this could easily overlap with this because of the information we've heard about other series, that, like, they're going to try and hit different age demographics. There might be like a chibi show, or a show that's more aimed very, very directly at kids and stuff like that. And I don't think they're going to stop the mainline series just because they've got, like, the really kids show going. They can have two things going at the same time if they plan it correctly, is basically the idea. So we don't know the full details of the Earth Avatar series, at least 26 episodes, and we'll see how it goes from there. Especially because the characters are so young in that series. They look the designs for them look particularly young. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe it is some sort of a thing where it's 26 episodes with them as like 8-year-olds or whatever, and then we do a bit of a time skip to maybe them as teens, and that's the second half of the series is when a bit of time has passed. Because the basic premise for this seems quite interesting, with the idea of effectively like traveling across the world to try and like figure out what happened in the past. Because that's the big thing coming out of this, is definitely the idea of what happened at the end of Korra's era that has kind of made the world this way for the next Avatar. And all the questions that people are freaking out about really, really heavily. Do you really think the show's not going to address stuff like why we potentially have two avatars, theoretically? Why the world has quote-unquote been destroyed, why the world is now in 7 Haven cities. That's the very premise of the show, is to explore those mysteries. How do we resolve what's happening? How do we fix it? And then if we can fix the problem, the nations probably are going to come back in some way, because we suddenly then won't have to live in these specific 7 cities. And it's pretty clear. I'm not going to show the leaked Earth Avatar images, just because that stuff is very much in the kind of copyright territory stuff, where it's full on leaked and we weren't really meant to see it, and kind of don't want to risk getting videos pulled down over that and stuff like that. And we know it happens because, again, the avatars had to deal with it. I'm probably not big enough that I would, but I don't want to mess around with that stuff. I know it's awkward for anyone who maybe hasn't seen it, in terms of trying to find it, because it probably has been pulled down from a lot of places. I think if you just search Pavi on like Twitter, you're like Avatar Pavi or something like that, you're going to come across it at some point, what the stuff is. And then especially if you watch my video, I describe in a lot of detail what the stuff that we saw is and isn't. So you can kind of compare what I say in the video to what you find to know what's kind of correct and what isn't. So yeah, and that's one thing. If you are watching and you haven't seen those videos from December, I think I have 3 main videos going over the various stages of leaks for the Earth Avatar series and my thoughts on them. It's quite interesting. I think I actually have that document open here. For anyone wondering, yeah, I don't have any of the images really in here. So yeah, there's a small bit of animatic stuff, of course. We have some text-based stuff. There's 25 pages of storyboards, of course. An initial concept art piece, casting script for the twins, designs for Pavi and Jay, final designs for Pavi and Jay, and then I think later on we got what was it, like the two cat animals, both twins, Jay and the other character as well. Nisha's kind of guardian character or whatever. I think it's a super interesting idea. I don't quite understand the negativity that there has been around the Earth Avatar stuff that we've seen. I think a lot of it has been an overreaction. And this is where I think certain Korra fans have been a little bit annoying about this, in terms of, like, again, do you really think they're just going to go, like, hey, Korra, like, made such a bad mistake that she destroyed the world, and we're just sticking with that Korra honestly just did that, and we're just trying to ruin Korra's legacy? And it's like, no, like, you don't think they're going to explore what actually did happen, that, something else might have happened. She might have saved the world from being properly destroyed, but this was the best she could do. You really don't think that there's going to be some sort of a truth that comes out when Pavi finally speaks to Korra for the first time? Like, people thinking that, like, they're trying to, like, erase Korra or something like that, when Korra is going to be the one and only past avatar for Pavi and or Nisha, depending on what they do with it. She's going to be here somewhere, and that's going to be a big moment whenever that happens, especially because there's all this kind of past stuff to kind of get into. And that's really, really interesting, to me at least. So it's just, like, calm down about it. And yeah, that's a good point from Brittany in the chat, is this is exactly what happened when Avatar came out. Sorry, when Korra first came out, everyone was like, why isn't this the sequel series to Avatar? Why are we getting this other new Avatar? And we've already been through this before. So especially Korra fans being the ones to kind of do this for the next Avatar, it's a little bit kind of ironic, I think, that this is happening. It's just like, I know it's a meme. Fandom's dealing with change. But I do think Avatar is a kind of franchise of change to a certain degree. Especially if you've read the novels and really like the novels, you know exactly about the Avatar cycle. That this franchise is ultimately about really, really highlighting, the different avatars and what they're about. And that's an important thing to note. It's just like that the cycle moves on. Like, in the grand scheme of things, like, Aang didn't get to, like, it was a pretty blunt transition from Aang to Korra in how they did it. I think you can look back on it now and realize, like, hey, it's fine. And that's the kind of point here. And it's weird to see the way some of this stuff is going, where people are kind of maybe freaking out a little bit that Aang is getting potentially 3 movies, like this image is sort of suggesting. When it's like, it's not like I think we've been overloaded with Aang in terms of content. Like, when was the last time we got a significant Aang story in terms of new canon content? And it's like Imbalance, and Imbalance was like, what, 2018, 2019? Like, Aang is in some of the short stories, but he's the one-shots, but he's not a focus in really like any of them. And especially more recently, he hasn't really even been in the books. So this idea that like Aang is overused, especially in certain content, is a bit... I don't really agree with that. If we're talking about merchandise, I think we've got a much bigger point of like book 1 Aang gets a bit overused. Korra hasn't been used a lot. But in terms of content, I think we're just in a bit of a drought overall at the moment with the way the publishing stuff is going. So I'm pretty excited about this, and I think most people probably will be when we finally get to see some visuals for this. There's going to be the usual stuff, I think, with fandoms of like people reacting to it in really intense ways just because it's doing stuff that's new, different, and interesting. That the Aang movie, I'm expecting to be a bit more nostalgia driven, a bit more straightforward Avatar. It's going to feel natural, fresh to a certain degree, but like we're going to know where we're at when we see the Aang movie. Whereas I think we're going to jump into the Earth Avatar series and feel a little bit lost with how much has changed. But that's the whole point in a way. That the reason we get these series, it seems like as part of the Avatar Studios deal, is because Mike and Brian basically are giving Paramount these Aang movies. They're doing the really obvious stuff to allow us to be more experimental and truly move the franchise on in the other projects. So sure, we might have to expect that all the movies are probably going to be Aang focused, but it means then that like the other stuff doesn't have to be Aang focused. We know that probably most of the other projects are not potentially going to be super Aang focused because we've got movies about him. And I think that's probably the best way to handle it overall. Maybe this isn't the case. Maybe it's only 2 Aang movies and maybe the 3rd movie can be something different. We just don't know. So there's that. Then Theatrical 2. There we go. Aang walking towards these ruins. It's hard to really analyze it because there's not too much to say. It's clearly a very similar design to Aang in this image here, as well as the 2023 image. So it's certainly the like Avatar Studios adult Aang design. Is this Aang walking towards something related to the Lost Realm, the Hidden Kingdom, referencing the movie titles potentially? Is this him at one of the old air temples? I'm leaning towards probably more the Lost Realm situation, just because technically like Aang has been to all the other air temples in ATLA, so there's maybe not as much like super hype behind just he goes to one of the other air temples necessarily. But still, there's some interesting ideas if it is a movie trilogy. That definitely, to me, opens the door for the storytelling to be a little bit more adventurous. first movie still is probably going to be, like, I think pretty standard to a certain degree. But the fact that by the time we get here, we'll likely know more about what the plan is after that. That's good. Hope the gang movie isn't like an hour long. I need 2 hour long movie. The likelihood is that it's going to be like 90 minutes. 90 minutes, maybe 100 minutes. And I don't think it's going to be much more than that. That's just I think the reality of it. That's just how they tend to operate with these things. Who knows? Maybe because Avatar seems to be a little bit of a special project for Paramount, maybe something else is happening there. But I do think they're probably working with in or around 90 minutes for this. So, obviously don't expect a short movie, but obviously don't expect a long movie. And I think they get around it by having a sequel to it, likely. Let's see. I really hope they bring back Dante Bosco as Zuko's voice actor. That also came up recently as news. What was it? Like Popverse put up an article referencing something Dante said at a convention a bunch of months ago, kind of really playing down the whole idea that maybe he has been cast as Zuko. I still put it up in the air. I don't think we know right now who is playing Zuko in the movie. It could be Dante. It might be Stephen Yeun if that copyright kind of stuff is to be believed. Or could be someone else. We just really, really don't know. Why haven't they revealed who it is a bit of an interesting situation, which is maybe where we lean into the idea of perhaps movie 2 still includes the other characters, but is more Zuko focused. So they're maybe waiting to reveal the Zuko actor until they can maybe more directly talk about this one, because this is going to be the starring role where he's going to be more of like supporting in this one. I personally don't really mind too much when it comes to the voice actors, just because if they keep Dante, fair enough. But also, they're moving away from trying to do the transition between kind of teenage, young adult Zuko into the different actor they have for older Zuko. Which is why I think they want to have a new voice actor for these characters, is that we've already had recastings for them as their older versions in Korra. And I think they just want to have new actors for them as kind of YA stuff. Who knows? It's hard to say. Any ideas when the new Avatar Braving the Elements season will begin? No clue. No clue whatsoever. In previous times, they've usually they've confirmed they're doing more like in the lead up to San Diego Comic-Con, which I would hope that the podcast is maybe back before then, just because I'd like to see what the podcast has to do and say when some of this movie news is actually happening. So I'd probably be expecting, probably within the next few months, we're probably going to get into that stuff a little bit more. That whole sort of thing. Because obviously they're going to be coming back in to do Korra primarily, but the hope is also that they have a little bit more of a news focus as well. So that could be interesting. Yeah, and then the other point with Dante as well is that I think it's maybe not the best look if Dante is like the only returning original voice actor, and everyone else has been replaced. I think it maybe feels a little bit better that they're just fully changing the cast, and that might just be for the best, to be like, hey, that's just what we're doing, and if you want to, bring back some of those voice actors in kind of cameo roles so that they get a chance to do something and still be involved in the franchise, but we have the actors that they want for these roles otherwise. But yeah, that's just my thoughts there. I'm never overly focused on who the voice actors are. I'm more about the content, and I kind of trust that they have the right people. This number 5, Air Symbol, new series. This is the most mysterious one on this list overall. I honestly do not know what to make of this really. In my video, when I covered this first, I noted that it obviously breaks the cycle if this is a main series. Like, if this is just, it's a series about an air avatar, it breaks the cycle because we're going air, water, earth, air, and we haven't done a series about fire yet. My thoughts probably at this point is that we know Avatar Studios is doing movies, series, spin-offs, and short-form content. My guess is that the reason that this seems slightly out of sequence is that this is probably one of those other kind of all-age type series thing. So this could be a kind of air-themed series that's more of a kids thing overall. That sort of idea. That could be an interesting one. I would love it to be potentially a Yang Chen series, or like I covered in my video, the second ever Avatar, who should be an air Avatar. Because one, of course, is technically fire, because that was his first element. So Avatar number 2 should be air. That's one of the more interesting ones. Something like that I think would be interesting. But I maybe have a suspicion, because this is probably a little bit more compressed of a schedule than we think. This probably is a spin-off series, would be my guess. So it might be like set in the Aang era, but like it's kids stuff going on. If it is that, I wonder how this maybe relates to the Bending Academy book that we're getting at some point later this year, which is also like a kids series that we likely expect to be set during the Aang era. But my guess is probably that this is probably the one where the visual likely is not really important, maybe, overall. The other factor in this is obviously that the fire symbol at the end here is obviously more, I think, highlighting the game, the AAA game that's coming out, which maybe is about a fire avatar. I'm not sure if that's confirmed necessarily. I know the visual that we have for it looks like a Fire Nation character, but because we're still up in the air in the whole create your own avatar, create your own character situation, it could be anything. So these two images and the symbols used here feel maybe the most placeholdery of all of this stuff, in my opinion. Aang airbending in the sky for Theatrical 3. Again, it's hard to say if this actually confirms it or not, but that's my thoughts. Let's see, Deli Katang on Twitter is saying Katara's going to be pregnant in the movie. Any thoughts on that? That is obviously just speculation. I don't think there's any actual concrete information to suggest for sure she is going to be pregnant. Timeline-wise, if Katara is going to be 26 in this movie, as we sort of suspect, it puts it in the rough ballpark of Bumi could have been born in the last year or two, or he is about to be born. So Katara, at some point maybe in the movie, being revealed to be pregnant could be something that happens, because I think it lines up with the timeline, but it's still very early. We don't really know anything about that. So it's sort of unclear. And then in general, my thoughts would be that if they are going to do that, I would want it to be something that gets revealed at the end, so that Katara isn't overly kept out of the action for most of the movie. And then we can have the kind of happy moment of that kind of reveal maybe more at the end. Or maybe Bumi has only recently been born, something like that. We can do something like that. I think that's the best way to go. The big belt with the yellow sash. If you look at the image, Toph is also wearing a rather big belt. She's not wearing a sash, but you'll note that Aang has the blue wristbands, and I think Katara's wearing the yellow sash to kind of, I think, represent their kind of relationship, kind of crossing the kind of nation borders. I don't really know the significance of both kind of female characters in the thing having the kind of big belt thing, but it is a pretty similar design aesthetic across both of them. Who knows? Maybe that is the case, but I wouldn't jump to that conclusion straight away. Because we still want Katara to be really heavily involved in the movie, and not just the entire plot point is just that she's pregnant. We want that to happen eventually at some point, because that's fun stuff, but not immediately, maybe. So yeah, the Theatrical 2 and 3, it gives them opportunities to maybe flesh out whatever's going on with the villains here a little bit more, explore more of the world. I'm interested to see if, like, when it's a trilogy of Aang movies, like, is it one continuous plot? Is it three separate plots that are minorly interlinked? What's the best way to go about that overall? Because I think you have to have each movie be roughly standalone, where you don't feel like you've only watched a third of a story. So they have to get that balance right overall. And it'll be interesting to see what they do with that. And then the fire symbol here is for new content here. This is the game, for sure, definitely. Let me see if I can quickly find this image. It might take me a second. Where am I going? I'm sure you guys have already seen it. I covered it in videos and stuff like that. But I think I wasn't quite thinking about that, because I think when I first saw the image, I was thinking that, like, this whole thing was like, oh, they're all shows. But then notably, this is new content, not new series. So I'm guessing it is a way to refer to gaming overall. And we know that is a big thing. Like, it's 7,000 years in the past. It seems like they have a rather big story idea to kind of go along with that. So, and it does look like it is a fire avatar overall. Okay, here we go. So yeah, if you haven't seen this image, this is likely what they're referring to when it comes to the fire content. This is the AAA upcoming Avatar video game, theoretically called Ice Wars, where it looks like potentially the Southern Water Tribe, not the Southern Water Tribe, Water Tribe of some sort is going to be the villain. With a potential fire avatar that you are playing as. Like, it looks like there's a new animal companion here, kind of some sort of a cat dragon type thing. Obviously, natural disaster happens, threatens to plunge the world into an ice age, and some sort of a conflict rises up. Very exciting. The 7,000 years in the past is a wide open part of the timeline, and it looks like they're really, really trying to do something big with the story. First Avatar AAA game. I think they really want to highlight that in a big way. So I think that's why they're doing that. Otherwise, I can't see what that is, because I don't see them doing a Roku series. I think right now, because the books are obviously book 2 is happening this year for Roku. I don't see them doing a series about Zito. He might get a book at some point, but I don't think they're doing a series on him. Could be one, but we have to wait and see what's going on here. But they're my thoughts on this, is that, like, I think that's pretty nice. I think we also have to just realize that after 10 years of basically having no animation, just the fact that we're going to get a movie and a series, regardless of what follows, is super, super exciting. And I know a lot of people are kind of like, almost like working themselves up about, but what about this thing? Why isn't this on the really large schedule of projects that we have coming up? Like, give them some time. Give them some time. We have to see how some of the early stuff goes, and we'll see what happens there. We also have to acknowledge that publishing stuff is still going to happen. More publishing stuff is going to happen. There is room for us to go a lot of places with this stuff as we go forward. That's kind of my thoughts there. Pavi series will continue the book naming of the seasons. The movies, I don't think there's really any way to call them books, but yeah, the seasons of the Pavi show, I think they're going to continue calling that. Korra content. So yeah, we should probably just address this. I sort of talked about it already, but yes, why isn't Korra on the schedule anywhere? Well, technically we don't know. Technically she is sort of included in the Earth Avatar series in the same way that like Aang is part of Korra. So we're going to get some Korra in the Earth series. Also, remember the comics are going to continue, and who knows what else we'll get. There's room for a lot of other stuff to happen. I'm assuming we'll get some sort of a Korra project eventually. There's just going to be a demand for it. I think a lot will depend on sort of what happens this year outside of like the obvious comic stuff, and if anything Korra does or doesn't get announced. It is frustrating that Korra does tend to be a little bit forgotten in everything, and it would be nice to see something. But I don't look at this and immediately think that Korra will never be touched on again. I don't think that. Like, Korra is a part of the franchise. They're not just going to abandon that, because they're going to have to use Korra in the Earth Avatar show. And there is a fandom there. As much as people want to kind of present this idea that like it wasn't as well received as like Avatar, but like, you know, we're talking about Avatar, which is this like top tier show, and like, oh no, Korra only reached this height, but it's still a super well regarded show overall. And it does feel like it's pretty much only like Avatar fans who will try to tell you that Korra is like a bad show, which is always a funny thing with fandom related stuff. Korra is a super high quality animated series, and to suggest otherwise, I think it's just kind of a crazy thing. There are issues that there are to talk about with Korra, just like there is with like almost any series, but like I think some people completely lose perspective when they talk about Korra. It is kind of crazy that like it's been so long of it, and especially like covering the show its entire run through. I've seen it all when it comes to Korra. It's kind of crazy, but yeah, we need new Korra content. We're gonna get something. What exactly they do with it in terms of like animated stuff, we don't know. But they haven't directly spoken to us about the plan. Like, is Avatar Studios ever going to sort of present this to us, something like this in a presentation, and speak to us as fans about this is our strategy? I'm assuming they won't overly mention the Netflix stuff, but like, hey, we're starting with the Aang movie because we know you all want that. We're then doing the direct continuation, which is what we've been doing. Aang, Korra, here's the next Avatar. Makes sense. They need to talk about, and the movies will continue with Aang, and then in our other series we're going to attempt to do this, and there'll be more projects after that. We that's the sort of stuff we need to get presented, because the big thing for this year, kind of going back to what I said at the very start of the stream, is they need to talk, they need to communicate finally, because on a scale of like 0 to like 100 in terms of like required communication, we are probably at around like, I would honestly say about like a 2 or a 3. And I don't think I'm really over exaggerating there when I say that. I only think we're about that far on, because all they've sort of told us up to now is that sort of Avatar Studios is doing stuff. The first movie is Aang related. And even then, most of the information about it that's out there feels like it's been relatively hidden, because there's no real visuals associated with it, and most of it is leaks. They have to do everything in terms of communication. Tell us what these projects are, that sort of stuff. And especially when stuff like this goes out, people find stuff like this, and they then immediately take it down, there's a little bit of a sense for like, hey, what's going on? Like, this exists, it has existed since 2021. What are we doing here? Why aren't you talking about this? Like, the Earth Avatar series. Why don't we know about this yet? Why has this not been officially acknowledged? Because again, officially, we only know that they plan to do series. That's all they've ever said when it comes to series, is that they plan to do them. everything about it being Earth Avatar and all the details we know about it is technically kind of leaked, rumored, mistakenly put out there kind of information. Most of it is not public. So what are we doing? Because they announced this like back in like 2022. They at least told us that the first movie is going to be about Aang. If this is going to be anytime soon, shouldn't they be saying that the series is going to be about the next Avatar at some point soon? And that's an interesting point as well. And I think that's where we get into this idea here. Yeah. Where is the big news coming for in the year? So, of course, this is what we're aiming for. This is when Avatar Studios is properly going to truly begin. I think technically it's going to begin when we see our first like officially released poster, especially when we get the first trailer, when we see some stuff properly. But we're still aiming for early 2026. Specifically January 30th is the current schedule for this. When are we going to find out about it? That's the interesting point. Let's see. Do you all remember that the movie was only announced after leaks? Yeah, the timing on that. Yeah, Janet Varney with the Kyoshi novel. Yeah, yeah. The voice actor for Korra holding the Kyoshi novel, saying that it's an Aang movie. Yeah, it was a little bit on the nose there. And yeah, so the first thing coming up is actually this. It's the ATLA 20th anniversary on February 21st. So this is like literally about a month away. It is this is like a really big anniversary. And I think the timing is somewhat nice for news. The problem is, I think everything points to the fact that they don't care about anniversaries as potential places for news to come from. Because did they acknowledge the 10-year anniversary of the ending of Korra? They said something, like there was a post, but it was not significant. It was not treated as being anything of particular note. It was just, hey, this is a thing, remember Korra? And move on. Whereas I think something like this is, they actually have to do it. I suppose, yeah, that's the other point here, is January 30th this year, so in 12 days, will they say anything to mark 1 year to go? There's a chance. Let's see. Okay, I froze for a second, I think, again. But anyway, I think there's a chance they say something to mark a year to go. But also, I don't think they really care about the anniversaries all that much. Because I think for movies like this, I think the things that they're going to care about a little bit more are the usual dates for movie marketing, which is sort of like, we need to at least have it like title announced and stuff like that with about 9 months to go. We need the first trailer out there probably 6 to 5 months before the movie. The last trailer about a month and a bit before the movie comes out. That's, I think, all they're really thinking about in terms of like the stuff that they have to do. The problem is they probably need to do a little bit more than that, because they're not just doing a solo movie. They are relaunching a franchise that will continue with multiple more movies after this and have series as well. So there has to be news related to the movie, but also news related to like the franchise. And I don't know what way they're going to handle that sort of stuff, because I do feel the movie is going to be oddly like, the information's going to be like protected with it. Like there's a reason there's not really leaks about the movie for the most part, whereas there are leaks about the series. Like they treat them differently pretty clearly. So I would like there to be something. It's one of those ones where I'm going to be keeping an eye out on the 30th if there is anything, but I'm not really expecting anything, unfortunately. The ATLA anniversary feels like it's huge because 20 years of the franchise starting, and you're like, what, 11 months to go until the movie type thing. It feels kind of perfect because the movie is Aang related as well. Like 20 years on, look, here's us officially announcing this thing. You can see how it makes a lot of sense. But do they care about the anniversary? Maybe. I'd be like kind of potentially. Would be my kind of thoughts there. That was weird. But anyway. Did I go away for a second there? Because I think my streaming was fine, but my kind of YouTube monitoring thing kind of crashed there for a second. So I don't actually know if I disappeared for a second there. It's probably fine. Okay, so yeah, that seems fine. So yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking just like maybe with maybe a slight bit more confidence, just because it's a little bit further into the year. Because I think when we're getting to this point, February, like we're well under a year to go at this point. Things are getting good. CinemaCon, like I list here, and I talked about in like some of my recent videos, like this is where I talk about expectations. Like this is not a we hope it's there. This is like it kind of has to be here. This is they have to be showing the movie at this thing to a certain degree in some way. We are going to get some news coming out of it here. Like there will have to be sort of like confirmation of like what the movie is actually called coming out of this event here. March 31st to April 3rd. And like if there isn't anything, we're maybe in a bit of trouble. I think that's where we're at. I think when we get to CinemaCon, where we're 3 full months into the year, and if we're still at a major industry event where technically Avatar has shown up for the last 3 years, I think, because obviously last year they announced the voice actors at this event. The year before that, they showed the image that we weren't meant to see, but we actually did get to see it. And then I think the year before that, there was the weird, like, someone described that they showed, like, an Earth symbol or something like that. I think that was this event. Kind of a weird thing. This is an industry event, obviously. That's important to remember. It is an industry event. When stuff is shown off at this, very, very, very likely we are not going to see it, but the people who do attend will be allowed to describe it. Because if you remember when we got that 2023 image, we all thought we were not going to get to see it, and we had to go base it off descriptions, and we were going over like, oh, adult Zuko is described as having like this hairstyle, and then we were like, what was he talking about? Like his hairstyle wasn't quite like that. It was not the best description. We're going to be going off stuff like that. So I'm guessing they'll show some sort of a basic kind of trailer type thing at this. And again, maybe to coincide with this, or, you know, at the very least, I think there will be an expectation that other stuff is happening behind the scenes at this point. Like, I suppose a question for chat is sort of like, is this. This is, I think, a kind of notable thing. The official Avatar Studios website that they now have technically does not mention the Aang movie specifically. It now has stuff that, like, it mentions Avatar Studios is working on animated content. But when is it actually going to have a section or any acknowledgement on the website that, hey, in under a year, an animated Aang movie is coming out, and this is what it's called? Like, how long are we going to be left waiting for that? Because, to me, if we have to wait until, like, maybe trailer 1 in, like, July, that's kind of crazy to me. That's really, really kind of crazy to me, if that's what's going on there. Like, I'd be hoping that somewhere February, March, some basic information gets put out there just because, hey, we're at the sort of time where you kind of have to finalize what you're doing here if you're going to hit a January date. Like, you have to actually let people know that the movie is officially called this. This is your logo, and you are locking in this release date, and that sort of stuff. I think you need that about 9 months to go. I don't think you can wait that much longer than that. So some early stuff I think has to happen in or around this. Like, that CinemaCon is the first time I would like properly like lock in news, unless we get some sort of a big delay situation. Unless there is some sort of a thing where there is a massive delay that happens. CinemaCon is probably the only place we can properly lock in information. I'd like there to be more, but again, a lot depends on what we're doing with Avatar as a franchise versus this specifically being a movie. Because if I just think about this as one movie, yeah, I can see them waiting a long time on a lot of this stuff, and us being kind of frustrated about the whole news cycle and how it goes, just because that's how movies tend to be. They don't tend to really market it like effectively a lot of the time, but I hope they get it right here, because they have to market the franchise again. So there's that. Let's see what's happened in chat here. Okay, so we have a new member for the channel, Serenity. Welcome. A few people have the blue arrow mark now. That's cool. Therian gifted a membership, and it was got by the Peels a Lie. Okay, so 2 new members. That's kind of cool. So you will have access to certain exclusive videos up on the channel. I still have to do one for this month. Not sure what I'm going to do, but probably in the coming week I'll do that. I'm not really sure exactly what it's going to be, but it'll be something. And there's all the other ones you can check out. So the way you find those is go to my channel, go to the community tabs, and when you're a member, you'll have access to the member exclusive posts, which will have links to a bunch of different videos from going years back, basically. The only Avatar stuff in there is some of my Netflix Avatar live reactions. I think everything except the first 2 is member exclusive. And the first 2 are just up publicly on the channel. So that will be a fun thing. And that gets added to basically every month. And then obviously there'll be more stuff going on in the membership, I think, when there's more to talk about as well. But that's just cool there. So yeah, news. Yeah, CinemaCon. Then we get to San Diego Comic-Con, which is, of course, where we always expect news. I don't know what to think of this when it comes to the movie, because I do think the movie will be done slightly separately to everything. Like, if we were doing a series first, I'd be 100% confident that with the timing that we have, we're doing news at San Diego. But, like, are we getting the trailer at San Diego? Do we do that anymore? I don't know. And then the timing is kind of weird for, like, Paramount stuff. It's, like, a little early. Just a little bit early. They tried to do their trailers, like, 5 months out rather than 6 months out, which is more of what this is. It'll be in or around this time. Like, as in, I don't know what people think in chat, but, like, it'll be a pretty shocking thing, won't it, if we don't have a Avatar Studios panel at this convention. As in, like, if the only thing that gets announced for this is potentially a publishing panel, that's like, wait, what are we doing? That's like really, really like questionable if we don't have a panel here. Because again, they have to announce a series at some point, and it's getting kind of late in the game when we get to here. And then, regardless of what happens here, we're in the time period where at some point here, stuff has to just get announced. The movie has to start having stuff happen to make it feel real. We just have to start hearing certain official stuff about it. Especially if we have a merchandise line coming. Like, merchandise leaks are probably going to happen at some point especially if it does have like movie toys in that line and stuff like that. So something's gonna happen here. They might do it because it's Avatar. Just be like, hey, we'll just do the trailer a little bit earlier. It's an animated movie. Avatar has a history at these conventions doing its news. It's within range of where we would usually do it. It's probably better to do the trailer here than to wait for their typical approach and do it randomly in the middle of August when it'd just be a random drop. I don't know. It's a weird one because if it was a series again, you'd expect them to do lots of concept art stuff, whereas I don't think they're going to do that for this movie. We don't really tend to find out about that sort of stuff when it comes to movies. They're a bit more open about that when it comes to series. So it'd be like official imagery stuff that happens here. It's interesting. Will Avatar get figures like Star Wars does with Black Series? My guess is that probably the toy line that's coming from Jazzwares is they probably are going to lean at least some of the merch towards collectors. I just think every sense that I get from Avatar from a kind of merchandise collecting point of view is that it leans a little bit more hardcore fan collecting it, that they want high quality figures rather than cheap, just any version of the figures. So I think they're going to lean it in that direction. It's still going to be like okay for kids to get, of course, if they want to, but they're going to be on the better side of things. Will it be full on? It's a collector line. Hard to say, but that does seem to be what Jazzwares is doing. Like they have lines of like anime figures where they basically seem to be leaning in that direction. And some of their other franchises, like I think Halo, basically they're quote unquote kind of more kind of adult orientated kind of figures as well. I think that's where they're gonna go. They're gonna have stuff for kids. It's just, you know, do we need all the potentially like gimmicky figures as well? One or two perhaps, because like they're doing stuff like dolls and play sets as well to go with the figures. I think they're going to do something like that. But a lot depends on, again, with the merchandise line. Is it full franchise? Is it just ATLA that we're doing? And then if it's going to launch this year, what are those first figures going to be? What way are you going to do the movie stuff? It's confusing. It's confusing because they have a lot of stuff to do. Like again, like I said, the marketing department for Avatar Studios eventually is going to have to go into overdrive because they're nowhere, basically, right now, officially. They are going to have to go from 0 to 100 in a couple of months and hope that it works out for them. And there are already, you know, the leaks, it feels like it's beginning to ramp up a little bit on leaks. I wouldn't be surprised if other stuff begins to happen. We're in that range, I think, where just I'd prefer they say something now to avoid, what just got announced earlier this week, the Switch 2. What was basically leaked entirely beforehand, that very announcement. That sort of idea. You want to avoid just your actual official announcement ultimately not having anything new because everyone knows about it already. And then New York Comic Con is going to be in a weird spot, I think, because it's October. You're still, 3 months out from the movie, give or take. It's too early to do a trailer 2. I think it's too late to do a trailer 1 if you're going to wait all this time to do it. So it just kind of feels like it's there. I'm assuming we'll for sure still have our publishing panel here. But I'd almost guess that this has to just be, San Diego has to be the debut of Avatar Studios. Maybe there's not a lot of maybe super specific information, but they make it potentially their big announcement to fans that, hey, we're back, we're communicating, we're finally here type thing. New York might be the first time they go in-depth on the series. I think October, it's so late in the year, they have to have the Earth series announced at this point, and I think they probably have to talk about it overall. That sort of thing. It's it's tricky because I don't really know what's going to happen there, because we're probably not going to get, like, say, trailer 2 until, like, December. If it remains in January. January as the date is it's a bit weird, but also I think it's fine. I know a lot of people say, oh, it's like a dumping ground month for movies, and it's like, well, if the movie's good enough, if they market it well enough, we're gonna see it. Like, it's not like we're not going to go to see the movie just because it's releasing in January. I guess it's more of the broader audience that, like, might not have the desire to see movies in January. But again, this is where the marketing has to do stuff and actually, like, make stuff happen. So I think January will be fine. And also, I think, like it's basically said in chat, I wouldn't be surprised if the movie gets slightly adjusted. I'd be shocked if we get through the entirety of the next year and we're waiting for the movie to come out on January 30th. I think it'll get adjusted by at least a couple of weeks, because I think a lot of other movies are going to get adjusted by a couple of weeks, and it's just what's going to happen, I think. Who knows? Maybe they'll surprise us and stick with it, but I'm very much viewing it as, like, January 30th is the date for now, and we will see that change slightly. As in, it won't be a delay. They're just choosing a date to get out of the way of other movies type thing. That's kind of the way I see that happening. Will a new Avatar game come to Switch 2? I guess so. Would be my thoughts. Because, yeah, my guess would be that, yeah, they'd want to have it on all the systems. Like, it's a AAA game, but I don't think they're trying to make that game like an industry leading game in terms of graphical quality, to the point where, like, it only runs on the highest tier systems. I think they're aiming to have the game just be available on the main systems, I think. So, again, there's a lot to be said about, like, well, if the game's aiming for, like, the PS5 and Xbox X, is it going to run the best on the Switch 2? Because the Switch 2 is still going to be kind of underpowered compared to them. You know, there's that discussion always to be had, but I'm assuming the game's going to be out on the Switch 2. It'd be weird if it didn't for a new system. Admittedly, I suppose by the time we get to the game's release, the system will be, like, probably 3 years old or something like that, but it is what it is. So, yeah, there's that. I'm just ready for news. Pretty tired of waiting. Like, it's becoming more and more of a baffling situation. Like, why did they announce Avatar Studios in 2021? Like, why did they at all make that public? I don't really understand it, given what the approach has kind of been in all of this time, where clearly there's no real attempt to properly build things up, like, well ahead of time necessarily. They're just waiting for it. Kind of last minute to a certain degree. Will we get physical media of new Avatar projects? Movie, definitely. Yeah, the movie, just because it's a movie, is definitely going to get DVD Blu-ray release. The series is an interesting one, where it depends on what they do with it, of course, because there's still absolutely the opportunity that the show still, like, airs on Nickelodeon, and I don't think we know what exactly the situation is. Like, is it absolutely a streaming first series and Nickelodeon is just basically not going to be involved? I'm assuming it'll get a physical release, just because it is a franchise that has had physical releases for everything else. And I think there's going to be a demand for that, but I don't know what exact way they're going to do, because the timing on how they do the release for streaming stuff is weird as well, because do you do it immediately or not? I really don't know. Like, I try to think of, like, a lot of the Star Wars stuff eventually comes out on Blu-ray, but it's positioned as very much kind of collector's edition Blu-ray style thing. And it happens quite a bit afterwards, like a good bit afterwards. I could see them doing something like that, where like a year afterwards it gets a release or something like that. It gets its full streaming run to be exclusive to that, and then eventually comes out. I think there's just going to be a demand from fans for it to be a physical release, and people are going to want the extras and stuff like that. But, it's one of those things. And you look back on those early announcements and the whole idea of... sound dropped out. I'm guessing it was just for a second. Okay, so yeah, it must have just been a quick second thing, or someone's internet connection or something like that. Yeah, they initially said that, like, hey, there's going to be Avatar content on the platform within 2 years. That didn't happen. 3 years. That didn't happen. 4 years. That didn't happen. It's frustrating that, like, I really want to know what the details are, because I do think there just probably has been delays and stuff like that. And I get it, like, early COVID, it seems like there was messiness at the start of Avatar Studios and stuff like that. Like, what exactly the Avatar Studios in 2021 and 2022 was up to is a little bit unclear, because I think most of the information we have, like, from like the Earth Avatar series leaks, as well as what am I talking about here? As well as the copyright information for the movie. It says it started production in 2023, and then a lot of the Earth Avatar early stuff is from 2023. It kind of feels like, wow, did it really take them like almost like 2 full years to, I guess, build up staff to make the studio, and then to decide on just what they wanted to do? Obviously, like, the initial plan compared to the reality of it happening was way off. But just kind of crazy to think about that. I guess when the art book comes out, we'll know quite a bit. That's gonna be super telling, I think, if what the dates are on some of the art book stuff, what they have to say about the history of Avatar Studios when we finally get some of that stuff. Because pretty much, like, all we know from, like, say 2021, 2022 is pretty much the early leaks. A lot of the Avatar news leaks about rumors are that this is a project here, like Korra movie, Kyoshi thing, Zuko movie. And clearly that stuff was the case, but was so early, and it's not really related to what the seemingly more finalized lineup is for the studio. It's just interesting to consider. Very, very interesting to consider. So there's that. And then, yeah, the final thing here is just, like, this is one of the things I had in my video previewing 2025 is just books publishing for this year. This is basically the lineup that we have. I don't have the dates on this stuff, but I pretty much know it off the top of my head. This is obviously this is the sort of reasonable list. This is no, I think, super strong speculation. These books are all confirmed. Yeah, I Am Toph is already out. Still trying to get a hold of a copy for me. Not sure why I can't get it right now, but anyway. Mako comic, of course. Omnibus collection, Ashes of the Academy. This is all like the first couple of months of the year. We have the free comic book day comic this year, which does have an Avatar book in it, which is interesting. Short story Omnibus is coming out. Dawn of Yang Chen paperback. How to Draw Avatar book is going to be at least something interesting. Bending Academy chapter book number 1 is interesting. Very, very eager to see what this kid's novel is. Still waiting on like a cover and stuff like that for this, a proper description. But this could be maybe a surprise, really interesting thing for the year. Awakening of Roku. I think at this point in the year, I'm kind of feeling like, oh yeah, like it is properly delayed into October. I don't feel it's going to get reversed back to July. I think this is the first time where we're not going to get a July release on the novel, which probably means everything is pushed back, like when we're going to get the proper description for the book, when we're going to get the cover. That, I think, will be felt. Like, when we get to July and it's like, where novel? Like, where is it? And then also I'm thinking myself in terms of like coverage, where if the book releases in October, the marketing for the movie is going to be going and on the verge of about to properly go up, because we'll be getting pretty close to release. That might be a bad timing for me to do a lot of coverage on the novel. So the later release might actually have a big impact on content, depending on what's happening. These two, I don't know. I simply don't know if this is actually going to happen. Korra one-shot number 2, Avatar one-shot number 7. Like, are we actually going to get other books for Avatar and Korra announced this year and released this year? Because I think it probably should. If publishing is ramping up, they should be able to do this, but I just don't know. I think the fact that the Korra books have been so badly delayed, and I think the fact that we're starting a new one-shot trilogy puts it up in the air to the point where I don't actually know if these are going to happen. I think we'll get announcements for sure for these two books. If they actually release this year, I don't think it's super clear. I think, like, if we have everything released by the end of March, we really should, if we're going into 2026 when Avatar Studios is going to start, I feel the comics have to be able to get the comics out within like 9 months of the previous one, if they have a consistent creative team. It's getting a bit crazy what's kind of actually going on. So there's that. Legacy of Yang Chen paperback is I think going to happen at some point this year. I am another character is basically confirmed from some of the marketing points on like the How to Draw book. There is going to be another one. We have to wait and see that. There's going to be a new Scream comics apparently. Hasn't been announced yet. Spirit World RPG book. Given that this was literally just like announced today, the Voyage of the Unity thing, if you saw my video I posted earlier on, we kind of finally have information on this. Though, I suppose timing-wise, like if that happens in the next few weeks, it's probably still going to take the core of a year to release. So this might not even be a 2025 like release by the time we get it. It might be very end of the year. We have to see what their scheduling is like. So I still think like they probably need to do a Spirit World book overall. So there's that. Do you think there's enough demand for a Spirit World series akin to Chronicles of the Avatar, but for other characters within the same depth? I think there's room for like another series of Avatar like novels to come out. Split. I thought that's a split book series akin to Chronicles of the Avatar, but for other characters. Yeah, I think they definitely should be able to do that. I hope Magpie do have a plan for the publishing ramping up, because I think we've needed more than just the one novel, for sure. So yeah, hopefully the Spirit World book, that's the most interesting lore stuff. Yeah, Faith Erin Hicks, we know she's still working on the comics. We don't know, like, is it this next one shot? Are we getting back to trilogies maybe, because this would maybe be the first book released like when Avatar Studios maybe starts. There's some interesting stuff happening, just because we do expect publishing to do a bit more this year at some point. So there's that. When is Free RPG Day? Let's see. Free RPG Day is June 21st, 2025. Publisher commitments for the day are due by December, so they've already decided if they're going to be doing that. Publisher marketing material deadline is February 14th, 2025. That's interesting. So it gives you a timing on, I suppose, when we should expect the details on this overall. So June. So that's a month before Comic-Con. So yeah, there's going to be at least one more minor, maybe RPG thing. Which, speaking of the RPG, actually, like, okay, this is going to be kind of cool for whatever it is. With all the extra stuff that there's going to be. I'll bring this up in a second, actually, the page. But yeah, we need one of the main books, because they don't really cover the details on spirits, and I think we need the lore. Especially if the Earth Avatar series is also going to have stuff that I think heavily utilizes spirits as like part of like the situation in the world. I think it's about time to kind of open the door on stuff like types of spirits and classifications of them and stuff like that, which an RPG book about the spirits would be really nice to see. But otherwise, I do think they're in a situation where they're going to have to decide what they want to do going forward with the RPG stuff, because I think we're running out of ideas for like big unique books, and they have to decide what's the next era for the game. Are we doing adult Aang era? Is that something new we can do? Are we going to go back and do like Yang Chen era? Are we doing Wan ancient era? That sort of stuff. And then yeah, that's the other point, as mentioned by Serenity in chat there. Are we going to get like Avatar Studios animated content tie-in material with the publishing? Because I think if Dark Horse are to expand their lineup of books, they have to move away from this stuff. And yeah, the Earth Avatar era as well. Yeah, Pavi era. They have to move away from this, which is like we have to have more than one shots, and like that it feels like they're kind of full up to a certain degree. If they're doing Korra and Avatar one shots, they need to bring on then another team to do whatever other comic they're doing. And what is that? Is it a prequel thing for the movie? Can they use the older Aang era once that movie comes out? Can we do other stuff? That's what we really want to know. Or is expanding just like Beast of the Four Nations? Are we finally going to get the book? Which, I suppose, while we're here actually in chat, I'll put it this way. Is Beasts of the Four Nations going to be announced this year? Are we actually going to hear official word about, like, it's finally coming, we finally have listings again, the book has a release date for maybe later this year or early 2026 or something like that? Will Beasts finally actually release and we have information on it? That's what I really want to know. Like, we got that slight update last year that the book is still being worked on. Not the most super official thing, but it was something. I hope it's finally going to happen. That would be a nice extra book to have, because they are this year they're basically going to run out of reprint books. Like, they've done the Avatar, they're doing this collection of omnibus editions. They're doing the short story omnibus. They're basically out of stuff to reprint. Like, they I guess they have the Avatar one-shot trilogies to do as omnibus or yeah, like they have omnibuses and stuff to do, but they need to do that. Yeah, there's a mix of with Beast of the Four Nations that, like, I can't bring myself to hope, and yeah, I believe it's finally going to happen. It's so difficult to know. Um, I hope it's one of those ones where I'd like word on it when it gets announced at like a convention about like what happened with this book. My guess, and it is just a guess, is just that it got messed up in the middle of Avatar Studios getting announced. Like a lot of stuff seemed to happen at Dark Horse, which we're only still recovering from, I think. But I really want to know like what exactly happened there, because I think we all but know the third Avatar Korra comic trilogy was basically about to be announced and then just disappeared when Avatar Studios got announced, and we obviously just didn't hear anything about it. And then much later, the Korra one-shots got announced. Which, you know, it's a trilogy, but it's very clearly something kind of different. So I think just Avatar Studios happening put a lot of what they were doing on the back burner, and that's why we have one-shots and we don't get trilogies anymore. It's an awkward situation. I'd love an official statement, but I don't think we're gonna get it. So yeah, that seems like the lineup of books for the year, but there's going to be other stuff, of course, because we have the calendar now for the year. It's Netflix. We hope there's this sort of stuff. There will be a comic announcements. We'll get stuff, but it's just, will it be this year? And then for stuff like releasing maybe towards the end of this year, it's like, is it better to put a book out in November, December this year? Or is it better to release it in January when the movie potentially is coming out? Or should you actually do it a bit earlier to not get swallowed up by the movie hype? And it's better to just have it on the shelves a few weeks beforehand type thing. It's an interesting discussion. And that's most of the content that I think I have covered here. What else? Like there's the merchandise line, of course. When will that actually get acknowledged? That's one where there has to be like a lead time. There's going to have to be some announcements made about that. If it is going to release this year, again, that's the thing. Beasts of the Four Nations is in a situation where officially what we know about Beasts of the Four Nations is that it's basically cancelled awaiting re-announcement from a publicly knowing about the book, being able to order the book perspective. But the update from last year was that one of the artists who's working on the book did kind of highlight that, no, hey, like, I'm literally working on art for this book right now. It hasn't been, like, completely cancelled. Like, it's not cancelled as a project, it's just cancelled in terms of the initial like images that we have of it, like its planned release in like 2021, 2022. That's what got cancelled. So putting it all together, it still exists. It's just that it has not been officially acknowledged in a while. But like, if it's a book that's still being worked on, I'm guessing that means it has to be coming within the next year or so. Would be my guess. But then it's also difficult to speculate, because what is Beast of the Four Nations? It's an interesting thing, because it's basically the first one of these giant hardcover style books that's just entirely new content. Like it's their first time doing one of these books since the last Korra art book when it first came out. And even then in this case, there's a difference between that book was mainly like primarily like an editing job, putting it all together. This is like, no, you have to make new art basically for all the animals and write like encyclopedia entries basically for the animals. Like this is just entirely brand new content, and to a certain degree, Dark Horse have never really done that much on a book, but we also don't maybe know enough about the book, exactly what it is. So, maybe it just is a book that has taken that much time to make. Maybe like with how like it's going to be like what, like I guess a 200 200-ish plus page book. Maybe it just has taken that long for a lot of the stuff to happen, because that's a lot of new art potentially. Because even if they use like a lot of the stock art that's out there, there's not that much for the animals really, and I don't think they would want to use screenshots. Let's see, was there ever an explanation for the different element designs that appear on the Avatar Studios website? Okay, what are we talking about here? Those ones are not different. I assume you mean these ones. I've seen a few people ask about it. I assume it's these ones you're talking about. Yeah, map at the bottom. I've always just interpreted these as these are just basic element or nation symbols. That, like, obviously we have the distinction between most of, I think the main symbols we have is obviously one represents the elements, one represents the nations, and I think this is just a simplified version of one of them. I'm guessing because it's used on the map, it is just the 4 nations. Because like we have all these varieties. Like say take the air symbol here. We have one that's 1 swirl. The typical air symbol we have is 3 swirls. Here's kind of 2 swirls. And it's the same with like a lot of this stuff. It's like here's 1 swirl and some lines. Here's like 2 swirls and some lines. And it's just how complicated it is. That's just the way I view a lot of this stuff. That they just have element symbols in a lot of stuff, and they use it on a bunch of stuff. Like I think on one of these shashibos, I think has it as well. I think it's the air one, if I remember correctly. Let me unfold this again and try to find the right. Yeah, it's on the cube side. So let me get this back into cube form. Okay. Haven't messed around with this in a bit. Anyway, hopefully I can get this before. There we go. Finally. They're also used on this. So I just take it as they're new symbols that they use. Sometimes they use in other times. Because like this air one has this, but then it just has the normal air symbol on it. And it's the same with like the other ones. They use the other symbols. This is like multiple combined together for anyone confused. Yeah, this uses like the normal water symbol, normal earth symbol and stuff like that, but it also uses the newer ones. I think that's just what they do. These are obviously pretty newly introduced, part of the newer lineup of kind of information. In the same way that like the background stuff, like you see this background symbol is used on a lot of stuff as well, kind of going forward. Let me actually bring up this article that I think I referenced in a video recently. Let's see. Because like this is recent, and again, this is actually the person where this comes from. These symbols. The reason we know this is correct is because they worked on the licensing expo where they had these kind of pillars. So you can see that this is kind of part of some of their new design work stuff for avatars. That like, hey, here is an interesting water background using the water tribe symbol or water bending symbol. earth, fire, air. They just introduce new stuff like this to use like all over the place overall, and you just see this like Korra. Let me try and find this. Korra. Yeah, this. Like, does anyone, for instance, when Korra came out, does anyone remember these symbols? These were like the Korra element nation symbols, because Korra introduced some new icons and stuff like that, and they did it on stuff like this, which is hilarious. Like, literally, one of the first ever pieces of official Korra merchandise, shot glasses, and this is what they used on it. They just have it. That's what they do. But they're obviously still using the older stuff as well. It's just marketing stuff. Like, if we had access to the image catalog for Avatar that has all the stock imagery and stuff like that, we'd be able to see that, like, yeah, they just have a lot of this stuff all over the place. The different lineup of images and stuff like that. Because yeah, they're definitely not leaving the kind of core symbols behind, because assuming this logo here is in any way correct, they're still using the original kind of main symbols that we all like. So there's that. Yeah. Okay, nothing there. Yeah, shot glasses, lunchbox. Yeah, the official Avatar YouTube put up a somewhat interesting video. I believe that one only explains the difference between what that's the one where they explain the nation symbols versus the element symbols. They don't, I believe, explain like all the different kind of simplified, more complicated version of like each of those symbols. I definitely watched that video, and I was waiting for them to be like, okay, I get that. Yeah, I know not everyone knows that about the difference between the nation and the element symbols, but anything else, not quite. So yeah, a little bit frustrating. And then that's the other thing, actually, like when we're talking about Avatar Studios news, like, when is that logo? No, when we talk about logo, when is stuff like that? Like, when is the official Instagram page? When is the YouTube page going to change from being like 95% like clip compilations to like, 50% clip compilations, but the rest of it's kind of news, updates, or at least just posts that give a sense that they're Avatar Studios channels and accounts, rather than specifically ATLA, which is what most of them are. That's the big thing for me that I can't call. Is that, like, one, is that actually going to happen? Is that going to change? Like, are we just going to get new official accounts, or are the ones that are already there going to change to become more official? Because it feels weird that, like, that Avatar, the official Avatar YouTube page has, like, how many subscribers does it have? 1,000 something. 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 1,000 som 3.05 million subscribers on that channel. But it is specifically called the Avatar The Last Airbender channel, though they do have Korra in their header image. When is that going to evolve? When is that going to become the Avatar Legends channel? The Avatar Studios channel? That sort of thing. That like, there's a lot of that sort of stuff that does need to change. Like, is Braving the Elements, when we're in the middle of news, is it going to be more of a news kind of thing where they have that opportunity to... This is not like an interview like 10, 15 years after the fact with this person. It's... No, this is like the first official interview with Jessica Matten or someone like that who's involved in the movie. That sort of thing is what we're kind of hoping for. That all that stuff changes to suddenly become... We're still referencing the show from 20 years ago. We're still referencing Korra from 10 years ago. To... No, we're looking ahead as well. Hey, look, we're starting to use some of the people from the new stuff on this as well. Because that's been the really frustrating thing about like Mike and Brian's appearances on all of them. It's like, we're bringing them on, but it's like, hey, we can't talk about the new stuff, so let's just talk about the old stuff. And it's now time to talk about the new stuff. And it's, again, when is the sort of business marketing side of things going to happen versus when is the sort of fandom marketing side of things going to happen? And obviously, one of them is minimal kind of interaction, whereas we want, I think, a lot of interaction. Like, remember Coronation? Anyone remember Coronation? That was cool. That was nice to have as like a consistent place to update. Don't think we're going to get something like that at all. Just because it's a movie and stuff like that. Because I think that's the really telling thing, is that whenever any news comes out, do you know where the first place I never look is? The official Avatar social media channels. If I hear rumblings on social media that, oh, there's some news about something, I'm going to the place where you find, like, you know, the book websites to find listings for things. I'm finding fans who post stuff first and foremost, not the official channels. And I think that's the really telling thing, is that I get shocked these days if the official channels post stuff as news. Like, I was pretty surprised when they posted the Ice Wars image. That sort of thing. Yeah. Yeah, Coronation, yeah, it was US only for some of the competitions, though I was able to get my stuff, thanks to Jordan from the website. That's why I have my one-of-a-kind Mako piece of art sitting there on my wall. That's, like, I assume basically the most valuable thing in my collection. It's from placing pretty highly in Coronation. So, always a cool thing to have, just that I have a Joaquim dos Santos original Mako on my wall. Low views on this official channel. Yeah, like, a lot of the recent stuff is what they're clipping parts of Braving the Elements episodes at the moment. And then, yeah, otherwise it's just a lot of clip stuff that doesn't do super well. Yeah, I think the problem is that they've run into over there is just like that. It feels like, literally, and I don't think this is much of an exaggeration, it feels like they've used every second of Avatar footage in every way possible. Like, they've done every possible compilation of clips that they can, and they've got nothing left to kind of post, basically. So they have to basically repeat overall. Collection update. The problem with doing collection updates is that one, it's basically the same video as before, but I have some new stuff. But I've done videos on basically all the new stuff that I've got, so I feel like I've already covered it basically. And then most of it just is the standard stuff that everyone has. Because like I'm in Ireland, so I don't have access to a lot of the fancier stuff, and I don't have the money to get like a bunch of the other stuff as well. So it's one of those ones where it's kind of just like, my collection from my other videos basically. There's that. Let's see. What are my thoughts on if I think there will be more Avatar Funko Pops due to the movie next year? I would be really surprised if we don't get Funkos for the new movie. I think that's probably the one like absolutely guaranteed thing that is going to happen, for sure. Absolutely. So let's see. Yeah, a lot of repeat polls. Okay, Brittany heading out, going to a birthday dinner. Oh yeah, you mentioned your birthday was pretty recently as well. So happy birthday to you as well. So that's cool. But yeah, Funko Pops. Yeah, I think they're definitely going to do them. I know they have the whole thing. Jazzwares has the new merchandise line. I don't think that excludes other places from having merchandise. So yeah, I think there are going to be more Avatar Pops. Just because like, I would say like, I think this is a pretty fair point with Funko. It's almost weird when there are not Funko Pops for a new thing. And especially because Avatar does have a history, like it has like 4 or 5 waves of pops. I'd be surprised if they don't. So yeah, that feels pretty locked in my mind. It's just about timing, I suppose, with a lot of that stuff in terms of like the merch always has to get produced ahead of time. How long after or coinciding with the movie are they going to be? That's what we don't know. More Korra Funko Pops, I don't know. I really don't know what's gone on with Korra Funko Pops. They just did that initial wave. I think 1 or 2 extra exclusive ones came out. There were some as part of that NFT wave. But I think a lot of people are just kind of like, hey, I basically don't consider them to be like proper Funko Pops because of how they did them. It's a pretty bad situation when it comes to that side of things. So I think that's just impossible to predict because it's been so long since the last wave. You never know when they're going to bring it back. Maybe with the popularity of the movie, there might be just a more broad wave of like they just do a pop for kind of almost anything Avatar, and there might be another core one in there. It's hard to say. The same thing with the merchandise line is that we don't know if the line is going to be ATLA specific, movie specific, or full franchise. Because like we could get all the core stuff that we want as part of the main line overall. So that's the frustrating thing there. Channel tends to follow fandom bias. Yeah, the channel does sort of just focus on stuff that is known to be popular in the fandom. So you'll notice this on Braving the Elements as well, is that, shipping, of course, is always going to be a historical thing within the fandom. It's never really that huge of a thing on a day-to-day basis in terms of, like, the way they talk about it. I think most people are just mostly annoyed by a lot of shipping discussion and discourse that happens these days, but, it gets them the interactions that they want by kind of highlighting it. It's just the way they do things. Paramount's website, yes, they do have stuff, and hopefully it'll get better as kind of time goes on. They don't market it kind of super well. let's just take a look actually at it here while we're here. So yeah, just a lot of stuff like this. Like, you know, we've seen this stuff before. Like, here's the DVD art that we've got that was used in some of the calendars and stuff like that. We've seen this art before. There's a hat, necklaces, pretty standard like t-shirts here, team, whatever. Mouse pad with some of the kind of stock imagery on it and stuff like that. It's nice enough, I think. The problem is it's pretty expensive. Like $33 for a t-shirt. I get it. It's a licensed t-shirt, but still, that seems on the pretty high end for a t-shirt. And I'm guessing the shipping is probably kind of not great here as well. You know, €13 for a sticker sheet, again, of stock imagery. Not super fantastic. This might be a more limited selection as well, because I'm in Ireland. I'm not really sure. And then look at this. Like, again, some of the art here, like nearly €50 for that t-shirt. Don't know about that. Pins, badges, standee. That's kind of interesting. But yeah, it's all pretty basic stuff. Probably a little bit overpriced, if you ask me. Do you have any of the board games like Avatar Monopoly, Fire Nation Rising, Crossroads of Destiny? I have Avatar Monopoly. I don't have Fire Nation Rising. I have Crossroads of Destiny. I definitely have a video up about Crossroads of Destiny. I think I just put up a social media post to say I got Avatar Monopoly just because there's Monopoly for like everything, so it's not that interesting. Still waiting to get my, what's it called again, actually? Let me just look this up. I'm still waiting to get my deck building game. What's it called? Aang's Destiny deck building game. I have it on pre-order. It's been on pre-order for a pretty long time for me, where I ordered it from. I'm expecting it at some point in the next month. I think it was meant to be released last year. We'll see what happens with that. Will they make a Pai Sho board game? Who knows? Who knows? I know the guy on the video game podcast they did on Braving the Elements or whatever. There was some comment about Pai Sho that kind of made it feel like, oh hey, do you have something in the plans for this? It feels like the most obvious thing that just never actually happened. But I don't. I think the issue is that I don't think they actually have the full rules of Pai Sho, that they just haven't revealed to us. I think they would actually just have to make up what the game actually is in practice. And then you have to make that balance of like, well, you've used it in quite a few stories and you've kind of half said how certain things happen. And if you can't do certain things from the show, people are going to be a little bit annoyed. So it's probably a super tough challenge to make that in the right way overall. I think everyone would really like it if they just put out a pretty nice looking Pai Sho set. But if they don't do the rules properly, people are going to get annoyed. It's just really, really clear that that's the way it's going to go. In a pretty extreme way. Like, just people are going to be super annoyed about some of that stuff. So yeah. So yeah, I'd really like to see them do it. Who does it? I don't know how much confidence I have in sort of that stuff like working out super well. But the sort of the one I think most of us fans imagine is something that I think everyone would like to see. But then they have to balance the idea of like, you know, everyone's going to want to use the White Lotus strategy. But then you also have to acknowledge that technically, as part of the way that it works, it's a very niche strategy within the game and stuff like that. Okay, yeah. I guess they do have a little bit of an out there with the idea of like there are regional forms of the game and stuff like that. Yeah. Oh yeah, music. I know someone asked in the chat about that before, and yeah, what's happening with the other soundtracks? There's been no official like anything said about book two, apart from the fact that apparently it's coming soon. Now, I think Jeremy Zuckerman is particularly bad about saying a lot of this kind of vague, like, oh yeah, this is happening type stuff. It's a little bit better now because we actually have the soundtrack and we have Avatar in concert, but still, it's been over a year since the last one. It's obviously coming. It's obviously just taking longer than they thought it would. I guess it's happening at some point. I just don't know when. I never know exactly what the full situation is. He on Instagram he does tend to somewhat regularly reply to people who ask about it. It's just like I don't know if there is any update right now. Obviously the most recent soundtrack thing was like it got released on CD, so CD is now an option as well as that. Okay, so he actually said something a bit ago that's a little bit more concrete. Okay, so let's see if we can find this. So I think in chat it said like 11 weeks ago or something like that. Is it this? Maybe this. Did he say something here? Yeah, it's coming. Yeah, so like it's coming. Second most recent post, a couple of replies down. Oh, here. Okay. Book 2. Mix stage, then mastering and production shouldn't be too much longer. And this was 11 weeks ago. Okay. So I don't know. He says that, and this was back in October. So I don't know. I take that to be like at some point, maybe more towards the middle of the year, like as in by Comic-Con we should have this. Maybe it'll be an announcement at Comic-Con, that sort of a thing. Maybe before that. It's so difficult to predict because to a certain degree, like the book one soundtrack, when they actually finally announced it, it kind of came a little bit out of nowhere. Same with Avatar in concert. It just goes from like, we're hearing rumors the soundtracks might happen, and then all of a sudden, boom, like it's happening basically. It's exciting. I do think from a communication standpoint, I think they should have been better about like when they started the process saying what the release cadence was going to be roughly. I get it, like it's probably complicated by the fact that they were doing Avatar in concert and recording stuff at the same time, but like I think most of us were probably expecting a roughly once a year release. And I don't know what the full situation is. So obviously what this puts it at maybe like what, a year and a half between releases? Maybe. And then like Korra, I don't know, maybe people will disagree, but like Am I the only one, or does anyone else agree that like they're maybe more interested in the Korra soundtracks happening before the Avatar ones potentially? Like, I still want the Avatar soundtracks, but it feels like the Korra soundtracks outside of maybe like 4 or 5 tracks, I don't feel like I know it that well because barely any of the pieces have been released like ever. Okay, so we knew Korra was part of the plan, but now he's saying that like it basically is going to be, yeah, like book 4 type thing. They're doing it immediately afterwards, so they're just doing it in sequence, which I think is fine. It is maybe a little bit frustrating that I guess we're going to have to maybe go through a book 1 again, but I think it'll have more tracks maybe than the CD version. I'm so excited for book 2 though. Korra book 2 soundtrack is probably the one I'm the most excited for, because like I think a lot of the music for like Wan's era, the Wan episodes, is just like so good that I really want isolated tracks from that. But there's wonderful stuff in book 3 and 4 as well. It's just it's more kind of unique. Like I think we all know the stuff from Avatar that we want, but we've also to a certain degree had those tracks for a while now. That it's cool, absolutely release the Avatar ones, but it's like the novel stuff is in the chorus stuff. So yeah, so it's cool to have this. It's just the hope is that like that the schedule maybe picks up a little bit, and it's not like we'll see the Korra Book 2 soundtrack in like 8 years or something like that. Like the pace hopefully can be like picked up a little bit. I'm guessing, like, is he gonna want to re-record Korra stuff? Or was that specific for Avatar because of the technology kind of issues and like the quality wasn't really there with them? He wanted to do that. Korra is more of like it was made in a more modern way, so maybe it'll go much more smoothly with Korra, and they'll get them out quicker. Don't know. Yeah, it does feel like the Korra soundtrack's probably the most like universally kind of like everyone agrees the soundtrack on Korra is good. But the only thing I think you get that with Korra. So that's kind of exciting. But then I kind of wonder, like, what's the deal with, like, say, the movie? The movie soundtrack, I'm guessing, is going to happen. We're going to get the release for that as well. And, like, that probably factors into some of this stuff as well, where, like, he's obviously working on that, I guess, at the same time as all this. Yeah, then the Earth Avatar series. Yeah, and then yeah, like the cover is interesting as well. Yeah, so like we have this like Aang ocean spirit thing. What did they do for book 2? Like they could keep the spirity theme up and do like Aang walking towards the cosmic representation of himself as he's about to kind of try to unlock the Avatar state. That's one way you can do it. Will it just go for like, hey, Ba Sing Se is kind of like the centerpiece of book 2, so it's more of a shot in that way? It'll be interesting to see what they do. Obviously, it's going to be green. It's going to be green. It's going to have the Earth symbol here, I guess. What book 2 thing could it be? Finale. Yeah, it feels like they're just going to go for finales. But yeah, is there anything else I want to talk about on this stream? Was there any publishing stuff I really wanted to mention? Like obviously part of the reason I'm maybe not as hyped for the Mako and Ashes of the Academy comic is that like I've read them already, so I'm already kind of like looking past those releases. But they're still exciting. Like I'm still looking forward to doing the more kind of public kind of facing content, being able to talk openly about all that stuff when it comes out, doing a live stream and stuff like that about it. So yeah. Yeah, still just like a lot of stuff like that publishing. Yeah, still no cover for the Bending Academy thing. Still nowhere else has posted a listing for that book either. That's a very weird thing. I'll just bring this up actually so you guys can see it. This is super interesting, but there's still so little information on it ultimately. Obviously this marketing point is quite interesting. That suggests a few other different books happening. But yeah, don't know what's going on with this. Feels like this was put up too early, and it's just like, hey, there's nothing really here, so we're not going to take it down, but we're also not going to talk about it just yet. Key selling points. They still have the older date for Avatar Studios stuff, but I think that's just slightly out of date marketing info. Still interesting. Let's see. Will we see the Fire Nation in Korra era in the Mako comic? Well, you don't need to wait for the Mako comic. You've already seen the Fire Nation in the Korra era, Bonte Island. But also, like, technically, yes. Pension Island is a fire island, so you do get to see a little bit of it. But like I said in my review, it's a bit of a different island. There's a unique dynamic on there that kind of means it's maybe not representative of like this is the Korra era Fire Nation necessarily, but it's an interesting dynamic with the island in the Mako comic. I'm interested to see what people say about it. How to Draw book. Nice. Not really expecting much from this, but yeah. Oh no, are people trying to ask spoilery questions about the Mako comic now? The recently delayed Mako comic. Only by a week, though, if you saw the video earlier on. 1 week delay. Super frustrating, given that like it's the book that you didn't want to see suffer another delay, but it's fine. It's basically still the same time it's coming out. Now, it obviously then puts pressure on Ashes of the Academy. Is Ashes of the Academy keeping its date, or is it also going to get delayed? Are we just going to get a situation where the two currently announced Avatar comics for the year release within 3 weeks of each other? Maybe. It's certainly something to get us to CinemaCon, and hopefully some information. That we have 2 books to discuss, and 2 pretty good books as well. That's the big thing, is that like it's actually going to be our first time in a while getting 2 comic releases in a year, because we've had a few years with just 1, and both of them are very good. So it is exciting. Korra and Avatar comic, and they're both interesting, so nice. Which does remind me that I probably need to record my spoiler review for the Mako comic before my review copy expires. I'll need to look up how much time I have left on that, but I'm pretty sure it's up until release. But I should probably check that. Which I suppose, for the chat, actually, which of the books are you more excited for? Are you more excited for the Mako comic or the May comic, Ashes of the Academy? Okay, let's see. Ashes of the Academy. Yeah. So there's definitely a mix here, because I think there's the thing with Korra comics where it's the first Korra comic in a really long time. It's the first time Mako's appearing in a comic in a really long time as well. And then on the Ashes of the Academy side of things, it's just they chose all the right stuff. Do you think that the new Ashes of the Academy book will be collected in a library style with the Azula comic and the Iroh comic soon, or will it take time? Well, we just got the first trilogy collected this year. So they now kind of confirmed they're finally doing that. Will they do it this year? They're running out of books to reprint, so they might need it. But they're still going to give it some time, because again, Ashes of the Academy is only coming out in March. My guess is that at some point in the middle of 2026, we'll hear about the library edition for the Azula in the Spirit Temple, Bounty Hunter to Tibur, and Ashes of the Academy collected edition. They usually give it at least a year after the release of the final book of the trilogy. I think there's weirdness with the timing stuff with the first one, just because they did that whole box set thing, and there was a lot of confusion just about how they were doing all that stuff. I think they know more what they're doing now, and so I'm guessing it'll be at some point in 2026, unless they're really busy and it might get delayed a bit more. And then I suppose, are they going to do the box set for that set? Which I don't think most people want the box set. It's confusing what they're doing. They've been a bit all over the place. Library edition. And then I'm assuming they'll also get omnibus editions at some point as well. That is their other avenue for reprints, and I think that mostly brings to a close all the stuff the Korra comics will have to be reprinted when they all come out. Which I suppose that'll be our last thing, actually. One of the last things I actually want to do here. I think I covered this in a video somewhat recently. Next one shots. So let's do Korra number 2. What characters do you guys want for the next one-shot comics? Korra, everyone's open basically except Mako and maybe Bolin. Looks like they're doing main characters. So who do you think they're going to be doing here for number 2 and 3? And then with Avatar, of course, we're moving on to the third one-shot trilogy, assuming this is what they're doing next. What characters do you think they're going to do for that? I think very clearly Asami is a must. Like, I think there's kind of no real question here. Asami has to be one of the next two. Like, I think I'd be really properly stunned if she wasn't. The third slot, I think, is a little bit more open. Like, Korra is an option, but they don't seem to maybe want to do the main characters, but maybe with what kind of happened with Korra comics overall, they might just want to do one about Korra. But it feels like Asami and Tenzin, Asami and Jinora, someone like that. Bolin is maybe an option if you pair him up with the right character, but he's kind of in the Mako comic enough that we probably don't need to do him. Avatar, I just think it's kind of difficult to predict. I think it feels like it has to be Sokka and two others. I think Ty Lee feels pretty clear, but then the other slot feels pretty wide open. Like, you've kind of done most of the main cast here. Who do you do next? Like, I think you've done enough, and Aang hasn't been the focus of things where maybe you can come back around and, like, finally we'll do Aang. And like, this maybe gives you like non-bender trilogy, 3 non-bender one-shots, but then who should the last one be? Because it feels like Korra is clearly going for like main characters basically. Avatar, it just kind of feels like, well, who's left to a certain degree. And then especially like if we continue with one-shots, I'm like, you're going to have to really stretch for like number 10, 11, 12 if you kind of continue into that. So it kind of feels like they have, at some point, have to have other stuff happen. And then like, yeah, can you do other eras and stuff like that? Like, who wouldn't want a Kyoshi comic, like a full comic about Kyoshi and or other avatars? That's a very easy way to kind of fill things out, is just to use the past lives very effectively. But are they allowed to really do that without the story being still very Aang focused? Because like the Rift is an example of like Yang Chen being pretty well used in a comic, but it's not really fully about her. That's one thing. I don't know. So there's still excitement about this, because like if they do an Asami comic, I think that's going to be something a lot of Korra fans really, really are interested in, especially if it's about the right story. If you make this an important story, Korra's not really in the Mako comic, same with Asami, so kind of feels like, yeah, bring them back for this one. That's going to be something people really want. Sokka definitely needs a story, and then it's hard to predict, because you have at this point run out of most of the main characters, because you've done basically all the other Team Avatar members. It feels like we're not using Aang or Zuko. It's tricky. And then like there's obviously the kind of fan focused stuff of like, you know, Red Lotus, like Izumi, but to a certain degree it feels like hardcore fans would buy a book that's like Izumi alone or something like that, or something Izumi. But from a marketing standpoint of like a one-shot comic, we don't know Izumi that well. Hardcore fans know who she is and like what the deal is, why that's such an important book. But unless you pretty much would have to have like Zuko on the cover, it'd have to be like Izumi plus like older Zuko, I think, to make that book sort of like work from a kind of marketing standpoint. Red Lotus is what fans want, but it feels like they're being oddly protective about certain backstories and like would they do that, and it's a bit of a tricky situation. But the characters who we really want information on, it kind of feels like, to a certain degree, it feels like Izumi is kind of off limits until we resolve Zuko and Mei, for sure. And we all know it's the direction that things are going in, but because canonically we've not fully committed to it just yet, like absolute confirmation, it feels like there's stuff like just that's weird that we can't do. That's just kind of frustrating. Same goes for like Sue's father and stuff like that. You know, why is that still a mystery? Julie, that is an interesting one. Like, you could do Julie maybe supported by Bolin, because Bolin is her assistant. That way Bolin gets to be the sort of secondary main character in 2 books, but he's never the main in any of them. But who knows? Varric's in that book as well. And Julie could also be in the Asami book as well, if it's kind of business focused. You know, there's options here. But there is also limitations. I think that is one thing with the one-shot stuff that we're dealing with right now in the comics, is that we are very limited in what we can do. Even if they do the best possible story imaginable, I think you always meet that brick wall that is, it's only 72 pages. Can we do this story in 72 pages? Is there enough story here to fill 72 pages in some cases? And then, why isn't this 2 books? Why isn't this 3 books in some cases? It's not ideal. And this is why we need like publishing to expand back and open the door to trilogies or different sorts of stories and stuff like that. Because I think what has kind of happened is that it felt like this was meant to just be the option to have a lot of these side stories. But side stories only work when you're getting main content. And we kind of haven't been getting main content. So these have had to lean into being kind of partial main content. And that's been a tricky kind of thing to get right. Red Lotus as a novel is always an interesting idea. But again, we have to see the novels expand into doing stuff like that. The ability for us to get sort of like one-off novels and stuff like that. Like, I'll actually mention this. I'm not sure if I've actually mentioned this on stream or anything like this at all. But I think it's been brought up once or twice. So if you go to Abrams and you just, this is Abrams when you search just Avatar. So what comes up is obviously all the Avatar stuff. So Awakening of Roku, Reckoning of Roku, all the different editions, paperbacks, blah, blah, blah. The last calendar is brought up here. This book comes up for Avatar because I believe some Avatar names get used in this book, so it's part of the tags. But then there's this that I think has had some discussion over the year or so this listing has been up. But it's a untitled Amulet YA Action Series number 1 that comes up when you search Avatar. Now, there's no information on it, other than that apparently it's going to be out in July this year, which is, interestingly, the usual time of the year when a novel comes out, but we don't know what the situation is. There's no details on it except that it's an untitled YA action series. The Avatar novels so far have been YA. Action series does fit for Avatar. Is this an Avatar book, or is this just mistagged and comes up? And we've kind of been waiting for a while to see what's happening here. I don't know. Is that anything? Hard to say. But again, it's been like that for a really, really long time. No information on it. And it's apparently coming out this year. And we're getting into the time of the year when we would usually get the kind of cover and description reveal for a July release Chronicles of the Avatar novel. This is in that slot, so might we find out about this in the next couple of weeks? Don't know. Really, really don't know. But it would line up with what the publishing, I think, is trying to do, which is to have more stuff happening, where you have your main series focused on avatars. Maybe this is something about, I don't know, something else. Hard to say. Really, really hard to say. It could be nothing, but it could be actually the first hint of something really, really, really interesting. Don't know what to make of it. Make Jaibao a Higo Damask, Darth Plagueis type character. Maybe. There's some interesting stuff with him. Like, if you read the RPG stuff recently, like, Jaibao was referenced to a certain degree in one of them, though he didn't actually like appear in it, but he had like an impact on the story. There's a story to be told there, and it probably is best told in a novel. It's just I think you have to establish a couple of novels doing other stuff in Avatar first, and then that story can be like one of the novels eventually. But I don't think you can jump to that like immediately. Like that would be a bit of a weird book to just like tomorrow we get to reveal that, oh yeah, out of nowhere they're just doing a Jiaibao book. That would be really interesting, but it would also be super surprising if they decided to do that. So we have to create the right series to kind of get to that story in. So there's stuff that we're waiting for that is going to happen soon. Like I said, in terms of like a lot of this stuff, the cover for this, if it's going to hit a July 1st release, the cover for this is going to have to hit at some point soon. A lot of this stuff we already kind of have. And then, yeah, we're hoping there maybe is some other books as well. Because just to actually highlight this for a second, in case people aren't aware of some of this stuff, is the marketing information about some of these books, actually. Let me open this up here. Yeah. The marketing stuff for these books always say this: exclusive announcement and cover reveal with a high-profile media outlet approximately 9 months ahead of on sale. Now, it's a little bit out of date in that in recent years they always do the announcements at Comic-Cons. But the idea that they try to do it about 9 months before release is sort of in line with the way they do it, but also it's kind of been a while since the last book that they just full on did 9 months before release, because Ashes of the Academy was only announced like well under that. If there is a book to be announced, it could be somewhat soon. It doesn't have to be like super early ahead of time. So there's some interesting stuff here depending on what they decide to do. Are you planning to do Awakening of Roku speculation predictions? Updating a history video? Speculation on Awakening of Roku, I will probably do something when we get the cover and proper description. Because I think I've already done an initial speculation video, but there's been no new information since then. I definitely did something where like I talked about like these are the open plot threads and here's some ideas. Was it a full-on video or did they just attach it onto something else? I don't really remember. But the problem is right now we don't have any information on the Awakening of Roku, because the description is still just there basically isn't a description. I think we had a one-liner at some point before, but yeah, there's nothing there. And until we get that, it's hard to speculate on what exactly it's going to be. So yeah, we need a description, need the cover probably. My guess is that it's just going to be, I'm guessing this will actually be the Earth Kingdom focus book, because the description for the first book kind of teased you with the idea that that's what it was going to be, but they ultimately hid the idea of what Lombok Island was. So you didn't get the kind of political thing you thought it was going to be necessarily. I'm thinking this book will be more of that kind of political thing. So that's what I expect with all the setup with like Tom In and stuff like that. But there's still some interesting things they're going to have to do in terms of like Roku and Sozin can't really meet again, basically, because they already kind of had to work around that a little bit, but they can't do it again. So those stories are going to have to be a little bit more separate now. What do we do? I'm interested, but I definitely need some more information. Do you think there'll be news that comes out of CinemaCon? Yes. This is, I think, the one thing we can kind of guarantee. I think I talked about this earlier in the stream, but I think some stuff will probably come out before we get to CinemaCon. I think it's going to be very minimal stuff, but I think even if we don't, at the very least, what will have to come out of CinemaCon is obvious stuff like what is the finalized title of this movie. They will have to show some sort of footage from the movie at this event if it's coming out early the next year. Like at this point, it'll be like, what, 9 months to go or something like that. We will probably get a description of that trailer or whatever they show, but we won't get to see it. They might coincide some actual marketing to kind of coincide with that, maybe. So I think some information will come out. That, like, I think this is the... What's the way to word this? I think this is probably the latest in the year we'll be waiting for our first, like, proper update on the movie. Will it be a ton of information? Probably not. But I think it will be more significant stuff than like last year when it was just voice actor information. I think some stuff is going to have to come to a head, and I think this is when it's going to have to start. Otherwise, yeah, Comic-Con is going to be the big one for, I think, a lot of the proper build-up stuff, but also I do think because it's a movie we're talking about up first, it is just going to do its own thing and just time it with whenever Paramount wants and feels like they have to put the stuff out. But then there is the separate discussion about, I think just from a franchise perspective, they have to do stuff a little bit differently because they still have to announce like the series and stuff like that. And I think they'll be able to be a bit more open talking about the series than they are with the movies. Just because there's a little bit more maybe riding on the movies doing well at the box office, whereas the series I think are allowed to be a bit more experimental because they're just going on streaming. We'll see what happens. Fire Nation history, stuff like that, purely depends on us getting more information. The reason I was able to do a video like in the first place to a certain degree was because we had recently got information that actually told us a bit about Fire Nation history. Earth King Jaelon, yeah, basically just a tease for the first book. I'm assuming we'll have to get to see that in this book. Like Roku properly meeting the world leaders and stuff like that will be a big thing probably. Night of Silent Sages, I'm guessing this is probably when they're finally going to reference that stuff. Yeah, the Earth Queen and everything else that we know from the RPG will probably have to come into play a little bit more in this book than the first one. And yeah, there's definitely an opportunity for some big Omashu stuff. I think that would be a really cool thing to do, is just to highlight, yeah, how does the whole like King or Queen of Omashu situation exactly work necessarily. But probably gonna mostly wrap it up there. So I suppose this is the final call for questions, topics in the chat here. And we can get to kind of wrapping things up. Usual plan for the year is I would like to do a stream once a month, but I'm not going to force it if there's nothing really to talk about. Like, I don't think we can do this every month where it's just, hopefully next month there's some news and let's just, talk about the same stuff over and over again overall. But at the very least, like I say February, there might not be any news. But for March, we're probably going to have 2 streams to review both of the comics, to discuss both comics. We're going to have one for the Mako comic, one for Ashes of the Academy, of course. Then CinemaCon, because of the dates and how it works, yeah, like April, there might be an early April stream to cover whatever has happened at CinemaCon, if anything of particular note comes out. And then, yeah, there'll be the usual kind of Comic-Con stuff as well. Why do I feel like a massive Avatar Studios delay is coming? Am I overthinking? I think we're through the point of like super delays. I think once we got through the fact that there were layoffs at Avatar Studios like just a bit over a year ago, we had the October into January delay, and we haven't had another massive delay. I think everyone is just feeling like things are going to go really wrong because they still haven't communicated yet. I think it's just there's going to be this really big build-up of anticipation until finally they say something official, but I don't think we're getting super delayed. I think the release date for the movie might be adjusted as we get closer to release, but I don't think it's going to be significantly far away from January 30th. I don't think it will be January 30th because I think it is going to be adjusted before then. But I don't think a big delay is coming of any sort. That's my thoughts on it. Is just that I think if there was a massive delay, that would be a major hit to the fandom. That would be a huge hit, but I don't really see anything to necessarily back that up. I think there's a bunch of stuff that really points to the fact that stuff is beginning to happen. Like, the website's been updated a few times. It finally says that they're doing stuff. They announced the video game. There's a merchandise line coming. This is stuff that, like, we're at the point now where you can sort of delay some of this stuff, but you can't delay it that much if you're going this big on a lot of this stuff. There is just a sense where, like, we're in it now, and you've just got to commit to it. I think they've had enough delays to where they just do need to kind of put stuff out, and I think they will. It's just that, yeah, until they finally say stuff, it's going to feel weird and that it's all falling apart. But I think we've been through the worst of it. We're through the worst of it. Who's my favorite character in the Avatar verse? For ATLA, it's Aang. For Korra, it's Korra. And then from, like, other era stuff, I like Wan. I know it's super boring, but I do think the main characters are characterized particularly well. Who's my favorite, like, character in terms of, like, non-obvious kind of main character stuff? Let me try and think about this. I like a lot of the characters is the thing. Like, there's not many characters I don't like. Like, a lot of stuff for, like, Kyoshi novels, Yang Chen novels. Like, I think a lot of the characters are really, really good. I have my favorites, of course. Like, I do really like Suki, but I also like Katara. This is just gonna get into a thing of me just naming off, like, every in any way notable character in the entire franchise. It's one of those ones where, like, the question is, like, it makes sense to ask any fan who your favorite character is, but it's like who's not my favorite character is kind of the sort of thing for me anyway. I just like a lot of them. Like, it is Aang overall. I wish I maybe had a more unique answer, but that's just my thoughts. Do I have any other particularly, like, unique favorites necessarily? As a minor character, like, I actually just am oddly drawn to, like, I think Chit Sang is a really good character who appears in, like, just a few episodes, but I wouldn't say he's, like, my favorite character. Malaya from the recent Roku novel was really, really interesting to me. But there's so many of them. Like from the Kyoshi novels, yeah, like, Yoon is interesting. Jeonju. So many. iMovie delayed to April 2026. Something like that, maybe. Like, if it does get a release date adjustment, like, I don't think it will be called a delay. I think it'll just be the date is being adjusted to better fit, like, around other movies. And this is just going to be something that happens because all movies are going to be slightly adjusting as they get closer to release, and you have to stay out of the way because you don't want to do a thing where, like, 4 or 5 big movies are all releasing on the exact same day because they're just going to eat away at each other. You have to have some space, and that's just what's going to happen. Like, the date's going to change. I don't think it will be that significantly delayed. Like, at this point, I think like it might get pushed into February, because like any delay basically pushes it into February. March, maybe. I'd be a bit surprised if it goes maybe further than that, but again, we don't know. We just don't know. But my guess is that they did their significant delay from October 25 to January 26. They won't want to be seen to be constantly moving this movie back after the history that the kind of studio has had with just constantly delaying everything, basically. How far do I think they are into the production on the Earth Avatar show? So, wait, what's the timing on this stuff? A lot of the early production stuff we have from the leaks are from like middle of 2023. The original leak of the animatic stuff, like as in like what seems to be like, I think at its core, like the first episode or two in full animatics, is from I think about August this year. So we're quite a few months on from there. And then animatics doesn't mean that they don't have any of the animation done. And then like it is a significant part of production. Like I'm assuming it's being animated at this point. Again, without knowing which studio they have working on it, like is Studio Mirback, is Flying Bark also doing the show as well as the movie? There's a lot of stuff that we don't really know. I think it's difficult to figure out because even though we have quite a bit of information on it, it's all from earlier stages of production. And then officially they have not actually announced the series yet, but it seems like they're a decent bit along. It's super difficult to call what the situation is here because, you know, we just know so little about what's going on. Like even the Aang movie, like we think we kind of have an idea for what's going on, but we don't really, like we have no leaks basically about that thing. We don't really know what the plot is. We have one very basic description that doesn't really tell us much. And other than that, we don't know a lot of other stuff. Late this year. A lot depends on on when in the year we maybe get word about a date change. Because it is a movie, like there is just a set path to announcing this stuff where like if they haven't changed the date and it's just January 30th for the next couple of months, then there is a pretty strong cutoff at latest like August. Like if we don't have a trailer by August, then there's a bit of a like, hey, what's going on here? There is just going to be a pattern to this because it's done like a movie. That if things don't change, they're going to follow this pattern. It just is the way they do things. Like if you saw like how they did Transformers 1, the marketing for that. If you saw how they did the marketing for Sonic 3, there's a very set in stone kind of pattern for these movies in that there's not a lot of information in between those kind of set kind of event parts of the marketing, but they do them at set points in time. And that's why I get why some people feel that like it's never going to happen. There's a problem. But at this point in time, given that for whatever reason they just don't seem to be ready to talk just yet, for the movie, it's actually fine that they haven't said much because we're still not quite a year away. And that's just the pattern. Like, I think I have a document that has some of this information in it. I talked about this in a video a bit ago. Yeah. this one here. So again, these are Paramount is what this movie is going to be. Transformers 1, Sonic 3. So Transformers 1 got its title confirmed as Transformers 1 in April 2023. It was in a full year later when it got the logo reveal. Then it had trailer 1 a week afterwards. Trailer 2 was in July, a couple of months ahead of the September release. And in between, there wasn't that much information apart from toy line stuff because it's Transformers. Sonic 3 had its logo reveal February 2nd, 2024. It had its first trailer quite a bit later after that fact in August 27th, which obviously highlights that's a trailer quite close to release. And the Sonic fandom was freaking out that the trailer took so long to come out. Like in June, July, people were like, what's happening? I think they just needed a slight bit more time for it here. And that's why it's a little bit delayed compared to the timing on Transformers. And then you can see here, trailer 2 a month before the release here. Obviously for our movie, we technically are not at any of these steps yet. We have a partial title reveal. It's a working title, but we technically have not had that revealed. We quote unquote have the logo, but we don't really, because this was not fully official information necessarily. So we've not even done a title reveal yet. We've not done a logo reveal. Trailer 1 is obviously going to have to be at some point that's like 4 months before release, which would be like June, July, August when we get information. It's one of those ones where it's just like, look, I don't blame anyone for being super pessimistic about this, because if you've been in the fandom since February 2021, it's been a rough time. It's been a really rough time. They got you excited for new content like 4 years ago, and have said like basically nothing since. But stuff is starting to happen. Like I said, the big things are like they announced a AAA video game. Avatar's never had a AAA video game. There's a merch line coming. Master licensing thing. Let me get the news article up about that. Like, this is big. Like this is probably the big thing when it comes to like from a business perspective, that like Paramount are not going to mess around with this, because they know they have confidence in Avatar, which is why they gave it a studio. They want it to do well on the shelves as well. And if you mistime a toy line and don't have the content to back it up, like it's going to cause a bit of a problem for them. So I think they have it in play here. And this announcement is quite significant. Like master licensing rights for all this sort of merch. Stuff like this. Like, this hasn't been super reported on, but I think this is a really significant thing from a franchise perspective, that Paramount want this to be a big franchise for them, like a TMNT. TMNT does very well on the toy shelves, and that kind of backs up like a lot of the other stuff. They want Avatar to kind of have that as well. So yeah, that's my thoughts, is that there will basically have to be something coming out of CinemaCon. There was the last 2 years. Will it be full visuals and stuff like that? Maybe not, but we'll hear stuff about the movie at CinemaCon. I would maybe begin to get worried if we don't hear anything coming out of CinemaCon. I do think that is probably the one of the things is by the time we get here and we get through this event, if we have not heard anything at this point, that's, I think, worry time. But if they did it last year, if they did it the year before, why wouldn't they do it this year, the year ahead of launch, when we have a release date and all this other stuff is happening? So yeah, these are the big two events. That's the big thing. So yeah, probably best to wrap up the stream now. Like I said, I'll probably have some sort of a stream next month, but it does sort of depend on if there is stuff to talk about. Otherwise, you'll see lots of news videos over the coming weeks as stuff comes out, whether that's about publishing, merchandise, anything Avatar basically that comes out. I'm guessing the Roku Voyage of the Unity Kickstarter is going to be the next kind of big thing we talk about as we build up to the release of the Mako comic and Ashes of the Academy. But yeah, that's what we're about here on the channel. Everything Avatar, not just the big projects, but also the publishing stuff as well. So thanks to everyone for coming out to the stream today and for the happy birthday messages and stuff like that. But yeah, thanks for watching the stream, and bye.